Hey everybody, it's Nicole here today with a couple of new cards featuring stamps, dies, and stencils from the Simon Says STAMPtember release. This release is just amazing. This is the Simon Says STAMPtember release. The products will be restocked if they sell out. It's just like any other release. This is just the big kickoff to STAMPtember. I'm going to be using the Beautiful Flowers 2 stamp set. This is a gorgeous stamp set. Obviously, it's Beautiful Flowers 2, so very similar to Beautiful Flowers 1. If you loved that stamp set, you're going to love this one as well. A good floral stamp set is just invaluable for creating all kinds of cards. In fact, I'm going to be sharing a couple of completely different occasion cards today with a thank you card and then a sympathy card. So you can really create anything with florals, which is amazing. I'm using some Bristol Smooth cardstock here and stamping that large image on the Bristol Smooth cardstock using a clear embossing ink, and then I'm going to heat set this with the Simon Says Stamp Antique Gold Embossing Powder. You've probably seen me watercolor with the zigs before. I usually emboss with white or clear embossing powder and then paint the color on. For these, I thought it would be a lot more showy to do the embossing with a color, in this case gold, and then watercolor like I normally do with zigs and a water brush pen. So I will be coloring all of these in here in just a second. We want to make sure we've heat set this entire thing. I would definitely recommend making sure your gun is nice and hot before you bring it to the paper so that it doesn't warp so much. I'm also going to do a little bit different color combination than what I normally do. This is definitely more of a tone-on-tone with maroons and pinks, reds, things like that, with gold accents. I have listed the colors I'm using across the top of the screen. First, I'm using deep red and pale rose. This is one of my go-to color combinations as far as that kind of maroon type of color combination. I love this. And from there, I kind of had to work with my markers to come up with some other color combinations because I didn't want my flowers to all be exactly alike, yet I wanted them to all be relatively in the same color family, so they just had little bits of difference. After I blend out with the lighter color, I'm going to take my water brush pen and blend this out even more and then let that color completely dry. That's going to give you the great watercolor effect. Make sure and clean off the tip of your water brush pen before you switch colors. For the leaves and stems, I'm using olive green and mid green. This is what I'll use throughout the design. And I really think that the gold embossing is super showy against the colors I'm using here. I really love it with the green. So pretty. Again, I did most of my blending with the lighter of the two green colors, but I did blend it out with the water brush pen in areas as well. The next flower is light carmine and pale pink. This is the lightest flower of the four. I again laid down my dark color first, blend out with the lighter color, and then blend out even further with the water brush pen. We want to blend these petals all the way out to the edge. You can really see the watercoloring, I think, a little bit better. A lot of times if I emboss with white, it's so hard to see as well. So this really gives you a better idea of the coloring process, I think, since you can see everything so much easier. And you could definitely choose any color combination you want. I will be using some similar colors to what I'm using here for coloring in my flowers when I choose the distress inks for the background. And I kind of had that in my head to begin with, knowing that I was going to do something similar, so I had a good idea kind of where I wanted to go with these flowers. This flower is geranium red and blush. Pretty subtle difference. I don't know if it translates a lot, but it does have a little bit of a difference. And then finally, we're going to just do deep red and blush instead of deep red and pale rose. I do think this one ended up looking a lot like deep red and pale rose, so you probably wouldn't have to switch up the marker colors if you didn't want to. Let's finish coloring in the flower. We'll finish coloring in the leaves. And then the awesome thing about the Beautiful Flowers 2 stamp set is there is a coordinating die set for this, so you can die cut this beautiful flower. You could also, if you wanted this to be the background of your card, trim it down to whatever size card front that you want to use, or die cut it into a rectangle shape using a die or a circle or whatever it might be, and you can pop it right on your card and not die cut the actual shape. Now, I decided to use Tattered Rose and Aged Mahogany Distress inks for my background. And originally, I just applied the inks through the Mod Stripes stencil. But then I ended up thinking it was a little bit too much of a white background. And you'll see that here in a minute. I left this in because I want you to see how you can kind of fix a background that maybe doesn't turn out perfectly that first time. And this one definitely does not. So that was just a little too white for me. So I ended up taking that Tattered Rose Distress ink and going over the entire panel. And you're going to lose a lot of your definition of the design. I did do this on Bristol Smooth cardstock. I think if you'd use smooth white cardstock, you might not lose as much of it. But on this, you kind of lose some of that definition. Then I'm just going to line my stencil back up, and I'm going to go over the whole thing again with my Tattered Rose and Aged Mahogany Distress inks. In fact, I wasn't totally happy with that, so I went over it a couple times. I know if it doesn't work out, I usually always try to fix it instead of throwing it away. So I'm just kind of pouncing that color really with a little bit heavier hand now all over. And that looks much better. So once I have that done, I am going to take some gold paint or gold watercolor paint here, and I watered it down, and I'm picking it up with a paintbrush and adding splatters all over the background. Then I'm going to let this completely dry while I work on my other flowers, whatever else it is I need to work on. Now, I also left this in the video because I wanted to share kind of how I came to the point that I did. I originally thought I would do my sentiment, which is a combination of greetings from the Beautiful Flowers 2 stamp set and tiny words, both new, on vellum, stamped with clear embossing ink, stamped with clear embossing ink and embossed with the antique gold embossing powder. And then I'm using the new sentiment labels dies to die cut that. And then I even die cut the little banner at the end. And I'm going to tuck this in the leaves. The thing is, and it probably would have been fine, but I wasn't super happy with it. I thought it was still kind of hard to read. I overlaid it. I used the Xyron sticker maker to put adhesive all over the back and layer it over the top. And I even completely put the entire card together. I went ahead and stuck the leaves down with a little extra Ranger Multi-Matte Medium. I'm going to go in with some Nuvo crystal drops in pale gold. I finished the card, set it aside, and started working on the second card. Well, it wasn't until I got to the end of that card and I changed up the greeting, what I used for the greeting on that card, that I realized I really did not like how the sentiment looked on this. A lot of times I do. I think this background's a little too busy for the vellum, but I thought it was important to leave it in here so you can see how you can still fix things if you need to. We don't always hit it out of the park on the first try. So I just really felt like it was a lot easier to read, die cut from white cardstock. I still embossed it with that antique gold embossing powder. I ended up doing the banner ends on both ends, trimmed it down a little bit shorter, and I'm going to pop it up with foam adhesive right over the design, but centering it. And I think this looks a lot better. I don't think it covers up too much of the flowers. I think it's a lot easier to see and a lot easier to read, and it picks up the white outline from the die cut as well, and I like that a lot better. For my second card, I decided instead of the large image, we're going to use 2 of the smaller images, and we're just simply going to color them in just like we did the large one. We're going to pick 2 of the color combinations. We'll use the greens for the leaves. I used the rest of that scrap of paper that I previously used for the larger flower. In fact, there are some individual leaves that I did not use. There's an individual flower. So if you wanted to do maybe a group of 3 flowers, you could build that 3rd flower very easily if you wanted to. I ended up just doing these 2 flowers. We're going to kind of overlay and layer those on the background and add a very simple, very sweet sentiment. So let's get this last flower colored in really quick. This is geranium red and pale pink. The first one was deep red and pale rose. And instead of covering the entire background with that mod stripes stencil background, so it went edge to edge on the first card, the second card is going to have a little bit smaller size panel. So I did the exact same inking and stenciling with the Tattered Rose and Aged Mahogany Distress inks, but I trimmed my background down to 4 inches by 5¼ inches, which is going to leave a nice white border all the way around the sides. I did stamp up more than one greeting when I did this. These sentiment label dies are really long. I wasn't exactly sure which sentiment I wanted to use, and so I picked one of them for the finished card, and I'm going to save the other one. I'll simply slip it into the stamp envelope so that if I need that greeting at another time, I will have it there. Again, this is the antique gold embossing powder. It really picks up the antique gold of the embossed flowers nicely. And then look at this awesome little sentiment label die. If you have ever wanted to perfectly die cut those sentiment strips that are so super popular, I do them all the time, but I always just eyeball it with my paper trimmer. This is going to die cut them perfectly. Look how awesome these are. So for the first card, I did a little bit wider strip because it was 2 lines of text. This is a single layer of text and just is amazing. It die cuts perfectly. You can add the little flag banner ends if you want to. You can leave it straight if you want to. For this card, I'm going to leave it straight. For the first card I shared, I made the little banner ends. There is just so many ways to use this. I'm really excited about these sentiment labels dies. So I've layered my flowers. We're going to take a little foam adhesive and put it on the back of this die cut sentiment strip and then pop this into place right over the bottom edge. And then we will add a scattering of some Nuvo crystal drops in pale gold. It also has the gold splatters all over the background. These are just going to provide a few dimensional little drops as well. So here's that little thin strip, and it reads, "Wishing you peace." So the perfect sweet card. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for these 2 cards featuring new stamps, dies, and stencils from the Simon Says Stamp STAMPtember 2018 release. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more cards featuring Simon Says Stamp that you might be interested in. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.